Good morning. Welcome back. Yesterday we were talking about conifers, the cone-bearing trees. Um, they grow straight up. You look at all those pine trees, noble firs, they grow straight up. They don't branch and grow outward. They do have branches that extend from that main trunk, but you notice that they don't really grow sideways unless some crazy accident happens. But for the most part, they're all straight up and down. That's why all those Christmas trees that you see are straight up and down. Now, most trees are not that way. It's only those conifers, for the most part, that grow straight up and down. Most trees do branch and they go out as well. Imagine that a tree, it's got its trunk, right? And we think of the trunk as wood, but really, a trunk is kind of just a lump of earth that's been pushed up. It's still this firm, hard earth, and things grow out of it. It continues to grow things out of that lump of earth. So a flowering tree, more than just its own tree and its own thing, is kind of just a lump of earth. And it's its own flower bed, its own garden filled with flowers, but all of the same type of flowers that grow out of the same tree or out of that same sort of raised bed, this big thing that's pushing up toward the sky. And it shares the same seasons too. When it gets wintry and when it gets cold in most places, not so much in California, but when it gets cold, um, the flowers tend to shut down and the leaves tend to go away and crops tend to go under the earth and the seeds tend to go underground and wait until spring, wait until it gets warm. And they feel that sunshine, they feel that rain, and they get that nice warm earth, and then those seeds are going to grow back up. But until then, they hibernate for the winter, and it's the same thing with the trees. It follows that same season. These flowering trees, they're going to lose their leaves, unlike the conifers that have those pine needles and those needles type of leaves. Those are going to stay open for business all throughout, even during the cold, because they might live up at a higher climate and it might stay cold there for longer or indefinitely, just cold year round. But down where they have seasons, you're going to have these trees that do lose their leaves in winter if the winter is pretty cold. Again, in California, we might have a winter that's not very cold at all, and so these trees are not going to lose their leaves. Some of them are just going to keep their leaves all year round, and that's fine too. But they're basically going to follow suit with what's growing in the ground because it's kind of like they're growing out of this tree, which is like an extended form of the ground. So flowering plants differ in the fact that they're not straight up, and flowering plants are also going to differ from these conifers in that they bear flowers. They have buds, they have flowers, which also means they're going to bear fruit of some sort. Some of them are going to be fruit trees that humans enjoy, like an apple tree, a pear tree, a cherry tree, a peach tree, things like that. First, it's going to have these beautiful flowers decorate the tree, and then where there used to be flowers, our pollinators are going to come. They're going to pollinate the flowers. And same thing even with nuts, even like these almond trees, they need these pollinators. They need these bees. Bees are an absolutely essential part of the system. And then once the flower is pollinated, we'll get into that in the future, but not right now. They are going to bear fruit, and you're going to have these little teeny tiny baby apples and peaches and almonds, and they're going to start to grow and get bigger and then bigger, and that sun is going to ripen them, and they're going to take these nutrients out of the tree. The trunk of the tree and the branches of the tree basically act like, as I said, with these things that are vascular, it's going to act as a straw to be able to suck up nutrients and water from the earth. And so with these flowering trees, these buds are going to suck up those nutrients and suck up those the water, and they're going to get the nutrition that they need. They're going to continue to create things that they think are a good idea to have more babies and have more trees and grow a family. And so, what is an almond? Well, an almond is a nut, and we like to eat almonds. We can make almond butter and almond milk and stuff like that. But to the tree, that almond is their baby. An almond, if grown in the right way, can actually make another almond tree. One teeny tiny little almond can grow a whole entire almond tree. Um, so it wants to protect its little baby. It envelops that almond in a really hard shell. There's a shell around the almond, and there's a little case around that. And hopefully that's going to last all winter long, and it's going to roll that almond away. And maybe some people are going to pick up those almonds. And um, so um, it's looking to create more babies, lots more babies. It wants to create a bunch more almond trees. Same thing with apples. Well, what's inside of an apple? Why do they have these apples? They're hoping that somebody's going to pick up this apple and eat it. And then when they're done with it and it gets to that hard part that's the core and they don't really want the core, that human will throw that apple into the bushes or something like that. And what will happen? Well, possibly we'll plant more apple trees. Um, and the same thing with all those other fruits. Perhaps a bird will come to the cherry tree and eat the cherry tree. Uh, eat the cherry tree. Excuse me. A bird's going to come to the cherry tree, peck and eat this cherry, and then it's going to accidentally swallow the seed, and it's going to fly off. And later on, it's going to poop out the cherry stone, that seed that's inside the cherry, because it wasn't able to absorb the nutrients from that hard seed. Now that seed is where the baby for the new cherry tree is. So the bird is going to take this nutrient-rich poop and poop it out, and then that poop is going to land somewhere. And if it lands in just the right place, it's actually going to feed the ground with the nutrients from the bird's poop, which is actually really good for this baby cherry tree. And that cherry pit is going to, hopefully, for that cherry tree, grow into a new cherry tree. And that's the whole goal of flowering plants. And I guess, well, everything really. They're just trying to make more plants. They're trying to replicate and make more of themselves. And they've all adapted themselves different ways of doing this. And luckily for us, sometimes these are really delicious ways, like creating sustainable fruits and yummy things that we want to eat. And then we end up growing trees like this. So when you get a bunch of trees, I know this is one of our past vocabulary words, it's an orchard. An orchard is a number of trees that you are growing intentionally for the purposes of harvesting something from that orchard. So hopefully you guys have been to an orchard and visited that before, and if not, hopefully we can get into a field trip where we'll be able to go to an orchard and see what they're growing there. They have tons of different kinds of orchards. They'll have orchards of almond trees. If you're driving up through Northern California, you'll see that's something we export. I think more than a third of the entire almonds in the world come from just California. And so we grow a lot of almonds here. We also grow a lot of avocados. We have avocado orchards here. As you continue to head up north, up in Washington State, they have these apple orchards. Even right here in Julian, when we went there over the summer, they had apple orchards. I think the guy said that he grew 64 different varieties of apple just in that one little apple orchard, where you could also buy apple pies. You could buy fresh pressed apple cider, which is absolutely amazing. And you could buy the honey, because they also raise their own bees, and they use their own bees to pollinate their apple trees because they needed the bees. And so if they knew that they needed the bees, then they also have this apiary that's right on the farm so that they could help pollinate those trees. So we'll get much more into flowering trees and the nature of them in the future. And also this week we'll be getting into flowering plants. Now, what is a flowering tree? Well, a flowering tree is pretty much like a grown adult. I mean, of the plant world, it can do most of the things that other things can do. It's pretty hardy. Some of them can last 50 years, 100 years, a few hundred years, depending on the type of tree. Some trees can last a very, very long time. They're quite hardy, and some can live longer than humans. And they can reproduce and create many, many, many offspring, sometimes hundreds, which is more than most humans. Most humans don't have hundreds of kids. We usually have about one or two, sometimes three, sometimes a little more. All right. Well, I will see y'all tomorrow, and thanks for tuning in.